Welcome back to Millennial Anti-Terrorizers. And today we're going to be talking about our own family history and kind of like what they've done for not just our community, but maybe even just within the military itself and serving their country. And I'm going to start off by saying I've had a lot of family kind of go through the military, but I'm going to really kind of pick on one person, which is my grandfather. He was my father's dad, and he served in the Army during the Korean War. With him serving, this was back in the 1950s, and with that, let me get my notes. Here we go. So it was during 1950s. My grandfather, born in 1931, he grew up just kind of being that old country boy and stuff like that, decided to go in the military. He was not drafted. He served during he was in 1950s, but this is around September time when he was discharged to the Korean front lines. His job was light weapons infantry, and his unit was with the 24th Infantry Division. I think it's called an infantry regiment, where he used to go out and just kind of help man the front lines and stuff like that. So coming from Georgia, which is called Fort Stewart, is where he was stationed at, and then he got deployed right into Korea September 2nd, and he was only there for a couple days. And while he was there, he actually ended up getting not shot, but shrapnel to the knee because of a missile that had landed really close to him while he was helping his fellow soldiers and stuff like that get to safety. And because he got wounded, he ended up getting awarded the Purple Heart. And this is kind of like what I found out about him. He didn't talk too much about his own stories. This is stuff that I just kind of looked up. But during that war, it said about 3,735 were killed during this war, but only 7,395 were wounded. So that's kind of like what I gathered from him. He didn't tell too much, but I also kind of gathered a few more people too, which was his father, being my great-grandfather. Luther Chumbley was his last name. And he got a draft card. This is all I found on him. So he was drafted, I'm assuming the Army, because it was during World War I. And this took place when he was actually in Kentucky. So depending on where he was, that probably kind of went into much. But other than that, that's all I got. But I did have a lot of people who did serve in the Army. I know on my grandmother's side of things, there were some World War II fighter pilots, I heard, just from random stories from growing up. And then I know I've got a cousin on my mother's side. She was in the Navy, and her mother was in the Air Force, little things like that. But I think I'm the only female Marine. Shortly after, that's when others started kind of joining the Marine Corps. But I've always kind of been the first. What about you guys? Did you guys have any family that kind of served or anything like that? What about you, Brody? Nolan?
Yeah, I've had a couple. My family's not huge in the military history, but starting off, I got two uncles. Both were in the Marines. I got Jeff Wagner. He was armor. And then I got Spencer Brody, and he was actually Marine Recon. Started out as 0331, Nolan.
Right. You always got that job.
Both of them, I guess, did their time. Spencer was a career man. He made it up to chief warrant officer. So,
okay.
And then I got a great uncle. My grandma's on my mom's side, her brother. He was PFC Donald Eugene Riles. He was killed in action in Vietnam in 1970. He was a dog handler doing minesweeping, and the dogs stepped on a landmine, and he didn't make it either.
Right.
And then I got both of my grandpas were in. My grandpa on my mom's side was in the Army from 57 to 59. I don't know what he did. I couldn't get that, but I'm not really close with my family, so it's kind of hard to get that information. But my grandpa on my dad's side, I do know, was in Fort Leonard Wood during Korea, 50 to 52.
Fort Leonard Wood.
He did have a funny story, I guess. He was an administrative assistant to a colonel and promoted himself to specialist.
There you go.
He snuck the paperwork in, kind of like straight out of MASH. type of. And then going further back, I got a great grandpa that was in the Civil War, and I guess he was kind of a badass. Spencer Aaron Sawyer. He got wounded, I don't know how many times, and just kept on going straight back into battle. That's pretty much what the Civil War was, but all of them served well, and I'm pretty proud of that heritage. I'm hoping to find more. That would be kind of nice.
Yeah, we'll definitely do another video podcast of this.
Yeah.
We'll definitely do. Nolan?
Well, Nolan.
So my family has been fighting in like every major war the United States has ever been in. So we were in the Revolutionary War, War of 1812, not the Mexican American War, but in the Civil War for the South. I actually lost two, great whatever grandfathers. After the war had ended, they were working their way back home and I guess saw action because not everybody got the word or whatever it may be. And apparently, at the end days of the Civil Wars, when there was like a lot of casualties, apparently. And we had some in World War One, but in World War II, my grandfather was one of 14 children. And out of the 14 children, 11 of them served in the military in the 1940s or 50s. And they accumulated over 70 years of military service in those 2 decades. One of them served 20 years in the Air Force and the Air Force Reserve after looking at his paperwork, which is interesting because it's not a DD 214. The forms are all kinds of different other forms when you actually look at world 1940s, 1950s separation paperwork, or even just a transfer. You got to get separated from active duty into reserves. But one of them, my uncle Steve, my great uncle Steve, he was actually in charge, or I should say he was a technical sergeant or a technical master sergeant or whatever it may be at the E8 in the Air Force when he got out. But he did a lot of bomb assessments for nuclear blasts in the 50s and 60s. So when they were doing the detonation of the nukes, his department in the Air Force would assess how strong and how much damage these weapons would do. And when I actually got into his paperwork, like one of the departments he was in was called Cum Shot. I shit you not. I'm sure it's an acronym and I'm sure it means something. But if you were Soviet and you come across Cum Shot department or attachment or something like that or other, then I'm sure they're not going to know what the hell it is. But from what I understand or guessing from the paperwork is it was the department that was doing bomb assessment blasts from nukes in the 50s and 60s. So that was kind of interesting going across that. There was one more, my grandfather's uncle or brother, Warren, so another great uncle, he was in an artillery unit and he was a Jeep driver and a Ford observer. And at one point, the Germans had pushed the Americans back. So he was behind enemy lines and they were working their way back through the lines because, the lines hadn't been stabled yet. Everything still kind of got gaps here and there. And when they were on a ridge line, they could see down in a valley a chateau. And on this chateau, there was cars in the front of the building, and the cars had standards. And if anybody in the military knows, you see a standard, little flag on a vehicle, that is a flag officer, a field marshal, a general, an admiral. And so this must have been a division headquarters. They called in some artillery on it, and he got a Bronze Star for it. But he apparently went AWOL for a while afterwards. He got back to the States, so he got kicked out as a private. but he was a sergeant at the time when he got the Bronze Star. So
Oh, wow.
nobody knew about this until we got the DD-214s and we looked at them. Once again, this generation really didn't talk about it. It was more their children, my father's generation, my mother's generation, the ones who joined in the 60s and 70s that told me a lot about the military.
Mm-hmm. Alex, got any stories?
Not really. I don't have any other relatives other than me. Maybe everybody I know's. My cousin. I got maybe a couple cousins that have joined up after my time or something, but I don't talk with them.
No. Okay, no stories that you've heard of. No worries. Okay. Well, let's kind of move forward then. So we just talked about our military. Like I was saying, let's kind of talk about like anything other than the military. Civil servants, meaning like police officers, and why I wanted to touch up on that because not everybody's meant for the military, but they're still doing their part back here, and that's kind of like why I wanted to touch bases about like my parents. They were actually both police officers. I don't want to say my biological dad, but my stepdad, meaning more so. Starting with my mom, her name was Janet. Not her married name, but her maiden name was Minnie, but she's been married twice. So her last name was Gilliana when she had passed away, but she served as a police officer for 20 or 25 plus years. She just hit her retirement the same year she had passed away, but she started as a dispatcher when she was 19 years old. So this is just before I was even born. And I do have a photo of that. She made the newspaper just for being the youngest female to actually be in the police as a police officer. So moving forward, she did that for a little while, and eventually she became a patrol officer, which has always been her favorite. She's always just kind of liked being on the roads and just kind of dealing with people there. But some of the things she has been doing over the years, she was a training officer at the training academy, and this is all in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So she's had this career at the same place the entire time. So she's actually trained other officers. And I remember the one officer, I was 18 years old, and one of my buddies that was playing hockey ended up being one of her recruits and stuff like that. So it was kind of interesting to kind of hear what she was like when she was at work, hearing how she was tough, but kind of sweet at the same time. I'm like, I thought he was hitting on my mom for a minute. It's like, okay, aren't you supposed to be getting your butt kicked? She's also done some other stuff. She's done riot control back in the 90s a lot. I remember her talking about how she used to have to wear a lot of this gear and stuff like that for when the KK rallies would come around. And at least there was no breakout, so she never really had to use her like canisters of the gas and stuff like that. But she's always having to wear a lot of that gear during the heat, and I remember her telling that kind of stuff. But she's done a lot through her entire career. Like there's just too much I could really talk about. And a lot of it I found out is during her funeral and just kind of looking at a lot of the awards she has done. And it's just, she was kind of that humbled person, never really talked about her career too much, but would do so much and go over and beyond. Which brings me to my stepdad next. He's done his fair share. He's definitely done 25 years or plus, but he started off as a police officer in Chicago, Illinois. His name was Dan Gilliana. And I remember him telling me stories from when he would do like just starting as duty, kind of walking and patrolling the streets and whatnot. And he came across this gang one time and they ended up carving like graffiti in his back with a knife. And I remember him showing us scars and stuff like that, just kind of like reiterating how bad these gangs were back during that time and how he would used to use the prostitutes to get information about like people around the area. So he was always very friendly with them because they were actually more like his mentor / parent growing up when his parents couldn't even take care of him. So he already kind of knew these people already. But kind of moving forward, he did eventually come to Colorado. He did have 3 sons, but he had eventually ended his career as a, what do you want to call it? A chief of police for Palmer Lake, Colorado. It was a small suburb of Monument, Colorado, there in Colorado Springs, kind of where it was near. He's done that, but he's been a detective. He's worked with actual celebrities too. He said he's met the coach of the Avalanche, pulled him over for drinking and driving. He's done security duty. I'm sure this is other states, not just within Colorado. He did Tom Hanks. I don't know the woman's name, but it's when the 101 Dalmatians became like a realistic movie versus animated. The woman that played Cruella DeVille, he actually had to do security for her. So he's been around the block. Like he's had so many stories. But the crazy part is he was so worried about people not liking him all the time. So it was kind of like seeing these two polar opposites of parents. Yet they've done so much that I was always so very proud of them. And so that's kind of like who I've become. But other than stories, my uncles, this is my dad's side of the family. Again, his two brothers, they were both, firefighters. And one did serve in the Navy as well. I just never really talked to him about his stories, but I know about that. I got tons of cousins who are also firefighters. And yeah, that's pretty much our family right there in a nutshell. Do you guys have anybody like that did stuff civil serving, Brody?
Yeah, I have an aunt that's somewhat of a badass.
Right.
She was smart. So like right at 18, she started getting into the federal prison system as a guard, and this was in right outside of Rochester, Minnesota. And I don't know if you guys know this, but that's like the VIP federal prison. So you're talking like El Chapo was there.
Yeah.
Like a lot of terrorists were sent there if Guantanamo was filled or whatever. So she's seen her fair share of stuff, but she could have retired before 40. I mean, she did all of her time there,
Wow.
and just I'm sure she has a lot of stories there. And she ended up retiring, but she does like contract work now, or she goes to like Georgia or Washington or wherever and gives classes and all this stuff. She's been really successful in that federal prison system. Like she's very well known, and she could have been like prison warden and all that stuff, but she didn't want to deal with the headache, so she's like, "Fuck that."
I know. With rank comes more responsibility.
Yeah, but outside of her, I don't really think anyone's been like a police officer or anything like that. So
Right.
that's me.
Nolan, what about you?
Not my immediate family or anything like that, but my wife's family, they were volunteer firefighters for decades in Lafayette, Colorado. And my wife's great grandfather, her grandfather told me this story that the Lafayette volunteer firefighter team, they did the drawn push wagon competition. I guess it's a fireman thing. And they held the record for like 60 years or something like that until you have like, firemen that can go to the gym and take protein shakes and get all big. These are just regular workers, coal miners and stuff like that were working as volunteers. And, her grandfather, he did it also. But most of my family or her family were in the manufacturing aspect of the war machine. Like my grandfather was in cotton factory, which was important for the war machine. My wife's family, both of them worked at Rocky Mountain Arsenal, Rocky Mountain Flats, or whatever they just called it. That place built the ICBMs. And they told me quite a bit about the stories of, testing and manufacturing and so on and so forth that you could imagine with it. And, so it wasn't really too many people getting into firefighters or especially law enforcement. There's nobody in my family that's any part of the Department of Justice whatsoever.
All right. Alex? You don't know either?
My aunt.
Oh.
My uncle's wife, my Aunt Martha, she's been like working for Ebenezer in Brush. It's a retirement place for like not like it's like hospice where a lot of them are there in they're elderly people that have injuries, like they're crippled in some way, or they're probably on their way out. And she works through them where some nowadays where people that are more in their house that are able to stay in their house and provide for themselves, but they're like disabled in some way and still need assistance, you know, so she goes and cooks for them, cleans for them, goes grocery
Okay.
shopping and stuff like that. So she's been doing that for like 30, 40, like she's getting close. I think she's going to be retiring this year, but like she's been doing it for like close to 30 years or something,
Good for her.
Nice.
you
Is
know.
this considered a nurse or something? Is what she does, or is this something else?
I'd say it's like being a nurse, but no, because nurses have to do like IV stuff,
Yeah,
and
that's what I wonder.
it's just more like at home care for people, you know, like the basic shit, like hey, make sure they take their medications and stuff like that. But she's just mostly like running errands for them, and you know,
Mhm.
if they're, I think now that's what she's doing more now is that if they need errands ran and they're still, you know, living in their own private home before they get, you know, it's still through the state of like and through the Ebenezer facility of the retirement place that's in town. It's right there in Brush, like right when you come in from 34, coming in from Fort Morgan.
Oh,
You'll
so this
see.
is Colorado. Okay.
Yeah, it's in Colorado, and
Okay.
out of any of the cousins I know that I have that went into the military, one went into the Navy in the medical field, and I think she got out. Last time I spoke to her was like 4, maybe 5 years ago, and I think she had gotten out or was doing like a reserve time, but at the same time she got like a job offer at a hospital in California.
Okay.
Um, fuck, I forgot where, but I remember she was like, "Yeah, dude, it's gonna be a 6-figure spot, man." And you know, there's a reserve unit for the because she was in the Navy. There's a reserve base like right next to it. It's somewhere. It's not like quite Southern California, but it's like it was somewhere bridging between Southern Cal, like right there where the border of Southern Cal, like that imaginary Southern California to Central region would be. It was somewhere like right around there.
Okay.
Kind of close. I don't think it was even close to the capital. I think it was just like just breaching between. I forgot where it was because I haven't spoken with her in a while now. But she said she was heading out to the West Coast and working as a not starting out as a nurse because she had more experience. So I think she was like finishing her school and going for her doctorate at that time. So I think
Good
she
for
might
her.
be doing her like some kind of doctor staff or being high staff somewhere.
Maybe like an assistant doctor or something.
Oh, something like again, it's been so long since I talked with her about
An
it, but
LPN? Is she
there
like
was
an LPN or something like that where
That's what I
she's a
think.
caregiver?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
no, she's more like I'd say probably nurse level, but like because of her experience being in the military and all and her progression that she made in the Navy, it's like being like already going into a spot like senior staff or some shit.
Okay.
Cause it was like she's like, yeah, they're offering me like a 6-figure spot, dude. I'm already going to be running this department when I get there, like head nurse or some shit, you know.
Yeah.
The person that's above the head nurse or something like that. I don't know before. And like I said, she was still going to school for stuff, so she was explaining that I'm still going to school for medical things. I'm think she was she's working on getting the doctorate to
That's
be
so
a
good.
doctor.
Oh, okay.
Sweet.
Awesome. Awesome.
That was a while ago. I spoke with her. That was been a minute.
All right.
And
Sorry.
my dad's brother was, I believe, both my dad's brother and his oldest son were cops, and I forget how long they were for. But my uncle was a cop for like a good 20 years or so, and he went from like being a cop to like you know, like the beat cop walking the beat or driving the cruiser patrol to being a you know, going up the ranks he went when he got his sergeant rank, he went and became a detective. So he was a detective for a while, then made lieutenant, and he was like in charge of one of their like sections for like narcotics and gangs and shit. And then he got into the DEA section, and then did a little bit of private. And the only thing he'd say about anything with his time being on the force was he saw it from day one as a beat cop all the way to being a DEA agent, going, dude, there's corruption all fucking throughout this system, and it's not worth it. And then he did the private investigating for a few years after he got out for some side cash, and he's just like, man, that was more like to pay the fucking bills for the month because I was behind a little bit. And 9 times out of 10, when a dude hits me up because he wants me to follow his wife around, yeah, dude, she's banging this dude and that dude around town.
Probably not.
Here's the evidence. Like, it got to the point. I remember he told me one time, he's like, I give him this. I tell him, look, here's the deets on your wife for this amount of money, because then he'd give him the price. Well, this is what my rate is, and this is what you're going to have to owe me. And then I don't know how much it would be, but let's just say, for another $20, I'll slip you this envelope, and I'll give you some solid advice. And then it'd be like, okay, and dude pop, $20-$50, whatever he'd say. And then the dude'd be like, so what's the advice? Don't open the envelope. Just leave her, dude.
You just gave me $50 for that shit?
Straight up, don't open the envelope. Just leave her, dude. And then tell him, walk out. Now, whatever you do with that's up to you, man. So he did that for a few years, and then he just started going into like handyman work, fixing and repairing shit, trying to, beautify people's porches and backyards and whatnot. Okay. And then his son did the same thing where, he went through the police force for a little. And he was actually with the sheriff's department, my cousin Nathan. And he'd be about the same age as my oldest sister, like right now, probably like close to his late 40s, early 50s. And same shit. I think he had some similar stories where he's like, yeah, dude, we clashed with the fucking local PDs all the time because someone's corrupt, and that's when they would have to come in with the sheriff department, and they'd have to take over the county, the patrols. Hey, dude, you guys got a corrupt high official. So, they did the same shit when I was in Desert Hot Springs, when I was living out there with my dad when I was in high school, where our town had a corrupt commission. The police commissioner was corrupt. Some of his officers were fucking corrupt. Some of the fucking desk sergeants and shit like that. So they had to go, Orange County came through and fucking cleaned house. And then for like the remainder of my like the remainder of my junior year going into my senior year was you'd see Orange County fucking or Riverside County sheriffs driving around in their cruisers, coming to the schools, checking on the students, doing what the cops would normally be doing. And you wouldn't see a single police cruiser, a single city police uniformed for like about a year and a half. And my uncle or my cousin Nathan had a similar story to that where they did this. I don't remember where he was when he did all this, but same thing. They had a corrupt official in charge of the fucking police precinct, and the sheriff had to come in and fucking do the duties of the, not just do what they do for the county as a sheriff, but now they got to go in and do the duties of the local city PD.
Yeah.
And whenever you have like that high official, it seems to be that trend no matter where you're at, when someone that's high up there, like the captain or the police chief, you're going to fucking have to go through and question all your other leadership and question every fucking individual that's in uniform here. And same story where out of doing all that, just a handful of like, hey, dude, like these half dozen motherfuckers were the clean ones. These were these were the knuckleheads that were kind of giving us the clue and the hint on shit was going on here. And, you end up fucking cleaning house out of like, 20, 30 cops, you only keep a handful of them. And then you see that it's just mainly the sheriff patrolling that shit. But just Man, that was a long time ago. I've asked. They talked about that,
Mm-hmm. That's crazy.
but other than that, like I kind of don't really know too much about the rest of the family and see what they've been doing or not.
All right. I want to say something.
I
You're
hear
talking
I
about
got a
corruption, though,
cousin.
Alex. I remember my stepdad. I don't know where this. It was definitely back in the '90s again, but he used to get really stressed out because a lot of the corruption was more of like the drugs and stuff being what do you call it, transported and stuff across borders, and they were a part of it.
Yeah.
Or it was always money laundering with cops. Like there was always something going on. And like you're right, and that's what was stressing like my parents out, even my mom when it came to her job. It's just there was so much corruption that they just couldn't win. So it's like it's like defeating the purpose of being a police officer at this point. Like it's so much within the system that's supposed to protect us. So,
Yeah.
I hear you though. All right. Well,
And I hear I got a cousin that works at NASA from the Air Force, but
oh wow.
again, that's another like hearsay. I don't know. I haven't talked to that relative in so long. I just heard that from other people that knew, or his mom, I think, commented and said something like that. I don't know if she was correct or not.
Right. All right. Ooh, let me get myself back here. All right. Well, that concludes our video today. And I really thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like. And that wraps up our video. Have a nice day.